What is a certificate of completion in construction? In this video, I'm going to talk to you about what it is and also what a certificate of occupancy is, go through the details so you can have a hyper focus on achieving both. If you're into that, you come to the right video, stay with us. All right, so let's first start with a certificate of completion. So this is a request. I think probably most people are worried about certificate of occupancy or a temporary certificate of occupancy more than a certificate of completion, right? So in construction, what we're really wanting to do from a residential standpoint is move in the residence, from a commercial standpoint, move in the business, and from an industrial standpoint, actually get the factory or the production plant or whatever it is started. So you're really looking for occupancy. Certificates of completion may actually be needed on your project for final payment or for other reasons, but let me just tell you this, I've always worked inside the parameters of substantial completion, final completion, and then from a city standpoint, TCO, which is temporary certificate of occupancy, and then certificate of occupancy. So let's talk about both of these and why you might need them. So let's start with certificate of completion. A certificate of completion is a certificate issued by the local government that certifies that the building has been completed according to plans and specs, local code, and any other AHJ regulations. The purpose of the certificate of completion is to certify that work has been done. It's usually required so that you can close out permits and actually be allowed to occupy the building. It may be necessary for transferring ownership of the property and obtaining financing or insurance. And it provides a level of certainty for the building occupants that the building is safe for occupancy. Typically, to get a certificate of completion, you will do a final inspection with the authority having jurisdiction. Make sure that everything is completed according to the building code, the plans, the specifications, any other regulations. The authority will review all open, relevant documentation and permits. It will make sure that everything is signed off and completed before issuing the certificate. This is not to be confused with the certificate of occupancy. The C of O, or the certificate of occupancy for a building, which is usually what I'm targeting, is to allow the tenant or the resident to occupy the finished facility and certifies that it's finished and ready and safe. And also a final inspection report is not a certificate of completion, right? Not to be confused with those two. A final inspection report will document the findings of the final inspection, but does not have the same legal bearing as a certificate of completion. And so now for clarity, I'd like to just go ahead and put that aside and say, hey, certificate of completion signifies that the building is done and has a lot of purposes, but shouldn't be confused with certificate of occupancy or your final inspection. Let's talk about your C of O. Your C of O is issued by the AHJ or local government authority, and it confirms that the building is ready to occupy and is compliant with all life safety requirements. So you're looking at ADA requirements, you're looking at access egress requirements, you're looking at your life safety walk, your fire alarm system, your fire sprinkler system, your elevators, anything dealing with your stairwells or your recall for your elevator. All of these systems need to be commissioned and in place for the building to be occupied. A certificate of occupancy confirms that all mechanical, electrical, plumbing, life safety systems are online and functional, ready for occupants. Similar to a certificate of completion, this communicates that the building is done, that it does meet the final requirements for completion, and it enables the tenants to move in with less liability for their employees, for the movers, and for anybody else as a part of the end user team. This could also be super crucial for financing, insurance, or property transactions. For instance, lenders may require a C of O before providing a mortgage. Similar to the certificate of completion, the certificate of occupancy, the authority having jurisdiction will walk the building and confirm that all documentation is complete, everything has been signed, all requirements have been made, all paperwork is in place, all needed deliverables are in hand, and will review those and make sure to issue the certificate of occupancy based on the successful completion of all of those requirements. This document provides legal and safety assurances. So certificate of completion is like certifying that the building is done. Certificate of occupancy is, hey, legally and from a safety standpoint, you can occupy the building. There is an assurance that it is safe for you to do so. And that really helps with all of your coverage for the permanent property owner and provides additional protections for anybody occupying the building. So let me anchor you back to why this is important. So when you're creating your construction production plan, you need to know when your C of O is and when you can be finally complete, okay? So you're going to want to work backwards. What documents, what certificates do the owner need in order to move in, to utilize the building, and to perform any other legal requirements? We've already talked about insurance, we've already talked about mortgages, we've already talked about property transfers, anything legally that the developer or owner needs to do. What certificates are required for that, and work that back. So then, like I said, you have final completion, substantial completion. You have your certificate of completion, your certificate of occupancy. Sometimes you even have a temporary certificate of occupancy. All of these play in. Typically, what a construction professional will focus on is substantial completion. So knowing what that means is crucial. So I always mention this, but let me mention it again. Typically, your substantial completion means that you have your elevators up and running, tested with the fire alarm system point to point, and overall testing complete. Fire alarm testing done with duct detectors with the HVAC system. All of your access and egress requirements are complete, including stairwell pressurization. You have all of your fire sprinklers and the fire pump room, if necessary, if you have a pump, up and running, that you have all ADA requirements throughout the building, that you have all emergency power systems up and running, and that you have a building that's complete with a functioning HVAC system. And that HVAC system needs to have a preliminary balancing report, be in the final stages of functional performance testing, and building flush. What this also means at substantial completion is that you have a punch list that's finished, that not that you finished the items, but the punch list itself, the list is finished from the architect, and you are in process of finishing those items before final completion. So you have to have the punch list, in addition to the preliminary balance report. All inspection sign-offs must be done. All open reports must be completed. The authority having jurisdiction must have sign-offs. You may need an engineering walk, and the building must be usable for its intended purpose, right? So there's a lot of different things here. So typically what I do is I'll say, okay, so just looking at it in a timeline, right? You've got your certificate of completion, final completion, right? Then you have your certificate of occupancy, substantial completion, which I kind of loop together, and then you might have temporary certificate of occupancy. I'm focusing on substantial completion. What I'll do is I'll list those requirements out and build a timeline backwards to show when I need to start those so I can complete on time with a bit of a buffer. That's how you do it. That's how you finish a job properly. And that's why we need to know what these different things mean. So you're not going to find consistency. If you're like, J Money, the certificate of completion and the certificate of occupancy, that's a little bit vague. Hey, let me tell you, different owners, different HJs use these different terms interchangeably sometimes for different reasons, in different timelines, for different legal requirements. My bottom line is certificate of completion certifies the building is done. Certificate of occupancy certifies you can occupy it from a legal and a safety requirement. And you have to know how to get to both for your overall project production plan. Otherwise, it's just going to drag on and on and on, and that could amount to a huge loss for the owner. Also, you might have liquidated damages, which is money you pay for being late. God forbid you have consequential damages, which those numbers could be astronomical. Meaning, like, let's say you were opening up a football stadium, right? And you didn't get it done on time and you had to cancel a game. What if that game amounted to $50 million? Consequential damages opens you up to all of that liability. So you have to know what these terms mean specific to your project. So understand what they are, learn it from your prime agreement and from your Division 1 specs, ask the question, detail it out, and form a timeline, a path to get there, and you will always be safe. I am going to give this to you in the form of a blog post in the description below. Hopefully you can make some use for it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. On we go.